All right, welcome to episode 347 of the Artcasters. This is a show where we talk about the ins and outs of cartooning, illustration, graphic design, and lot about comics. As usual, I'm really excited about our guest today. As usual, before we introduce our guest, we'll make the rounds, let everybody know where to find our work, and then we'll introduce our guest. You're on my YouTube channel, so if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit the bell, and that way you get notifications when we're about to go live. And make sure you pick up Jacob's Apartment um, and Two Stories, my two graphic novels. I'll save the pitch for some other time. Scott, where can everybody find your work?
Yeah, first I just want to say it's good to be back because I wasn't able to make it the last show because of
Yeah, we
I had
missed you.
but I brought in some big guns. We brought in Vincent Price from the
Yeah.
dead, so he helped host for the Halloween episode. You can find. But anyway, you can find me on my YouTube channel. It's just search Cirque Works Art Labs on YouTube. If you're looking for advice, inspiration, art, all that kind of stuff, you can find that on my YouTube channel. There's also on that channel you can also find Making Comics 101, which is my series on how to make comics, and it's basically a step-by-step, very comprehensive course for free on YouTube. Everything from coming up with your ideas all the way to printing, publishing, and everything in between. That's on the YouTube channel. And other than that, you can find digital products to help speed up your comic making process, which is apropos to what we're going to be talking about with our guest today. But I've got all kinds of digital products for making comics. You can find that on my website at cirquebooks.com, as well as my comics and prints and all that other stuff. And for anyone that's curious, that I'm packing up the Kickstarters right now, so they're going to be going out very soon. So
oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I could have waited to give you yours in person, but I think hopefully yours will arrive before you leave, and you can, because I already paid for the stamp and everything. So
Oh yeah,
that'll
be good.
Oh, by the way, our friend Mark from Lesser Known Comics recommended Pirate Ship to me, and it is like awesome. So if you are fulfilling like any kind of printing or whatever. And they can also, it's the first one that I think that I've used that actually you can ship medium mail through, but it'll find the best rates, and I don't have to, I was so like, oh, I'm going to have to go to the post office and go and get all these boxes and go through all the, trying to get them to run all these different things. And it was so far so simple. So just a little bit of advice if anyone's not familiar with Pirate Ship. And it's a really cool website. It's like, it's fun, and it's pirates and all that kind of stuff. It's just really cool. I had a really cool experience using it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Free endorsement for Pirate Ship. So Corey, speaking of pirates, where can everybody find your work?
I'm not sure what my work has to do with pirates, but you're welcome.
I was trying for a transition.
Got a lot of skulls and crossbones lately. So.
Yeah, there you go. That works. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to look at all the skulls and crows and everything that I'm drawing, you can go to CoreyKerr.com. If you want to get on my email newsletter, then just add a /email after that, and it'll get you there. I'm still working on some stuff, and I'll finish another one up probably tonight. I'm hoping maybe tomorrow night. So we'll see.
Awesome. Okay, and our guest tonight, I'm really excited, is a cartoonist that's extremely talented, and then aside from that, also used to be a pro wrestler, which is pretty amazing. Our guest, Scott Lost. Scott, where can everybody find your work? And yeah.
Hey everybody. Other side. There, Scott Lost at Scott Lost on Twitter and Instagram. And you can find my books at accidentalaliens.com, Second Shift, The Tale of Minimum Wage Workers During the Day and Superheroes at Night, and Wonders of Melisande, Anthropomorphic Dinosaurs versus Humans. 1,000 years in the future, we start colonizing other planets and come across the planet Melisande, where the meteor never hit and dinosaurs of that world survived and evolved. So it's two dominant species trying to coexist on one planet, and that usually does not work out.
Love it. Cool. So Scott, part of like what we wanted to have you on to talk about was you had talked about this a little bit on our friend Gary Hodges channel, this technique that you developed for working on comics that you call like the Slack technique. And so I want us to get into that, but obviously it's your first time on Artcasters, so we want to run through a little bit of your history in comics and stuff like that first. So I guess before we get into the Slack technique, which I think everyone will really enjoy and like get a lot out of, because it is an interesting approach to making comics, why don't we talk about just real quick what got you into making comics in the first place? Like, why comics?
And maybe touch a little bit on the, because it's an interesting story. Your past as a professional wrestler too. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Shout out to Gary. He's in the chat there. What's up, Gary? Thanks for introducing me to these guys. So yeah, I was a pro wrestler for 10 years, from the age 20 to 30. I was doing pro wrestling, but before that, when I was a little kid, I was drawing comics, just like you guys, I'd imagine. And it's funny enough, I was training myself to become a comic book artist. So I just figured, okay, comics come out every month. I need to draw a page a day.
Yeah.
Because they still need to ink it and they need to color it, because I knew I didn't want to do any of that. So when I was a kid, during summer school, I wouldn't allow myself, or during the summer, I wouldn't allow myself to go out to play until I finished a page of art. So like ever since I was a little kid, I was training myself to become a comic book artist. I just loved comics so much. And then the 20s, you know, like when I was 18, 19, you know, finished high school, me and my friends were wrestling on the trampoline, like safe stuff. Like I was writing the matches out and we'd perform on my trampoline. And then I met a guy, one of my friends, and he wanted to be a pro wrestler. And he goes, dude, you got to come up to me. Let's go to LA. My girlfriend found this flyer for Ultimate University, which was the training school of John Cena and Victoria, like a couple of famous wrestlers. And I was just like, oh yeah, let's do that. So we went up, and the guys that were training were basically our size, and we're like, we got to do this. So we started training right away, and under a year we were wrestling matches, which is pretty fast. So
yeah,
I think we were training for like 6 months, and they started having us do matches already. So we were pretty good right away. And so, yeah, that was fun. And I did that for 10 years. It was a great time. But at year 8.5, it was no longer fun. It was becoming work, and not the good kind of work, you know, like comics. Like when you draw a page, it's work. It is.
Mhm.
It can be very difficult. It's not always fun. Sometimes you have those talking head pages. You're just like, I need to get these done. But at the end of the day, you still love it. And like with wrestling, I found that I wasn't loving it at year 8.5. And so I told my family I would stop after 10 years if I wasn't making a living off of it. So at 8.5, I was like, yeah, I think I am going to be done. And a couple of my buddies convinced me to ride it out till 10, see if things change, see if we, you know, the industry was down at the time. And it's like comics. Like sometimes sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down.
Yeah.
And so the business at that time was down. It was down the entire time that I was working, basically. You couldn't make a living off of it. And so 8.5, I just started goofing around. I'm like, I'm just going to have fun with my matches. I'm going to do whatever I want. Instead of trying to have the best match on the show, I'm going to have the funnest match on the show and like entertain myself while I'm wrestling. And then it started to translate. Like I was pretty popular, but I started to become more popular in that last 1.5 years. It's just, I think they could feel the energy of my matches were different, and they didn't know what was going on, but they could sense something. And so like, you know, my star was rising and stuff, but at, you know, year 10, I was like, yeah, I'm done. You know, it's fun again. I'm actually starting to love it again because that's all I'm doing is having fun with it. And but I knew it was just like, this is going to take a toll on me already. 10 years of my life of doing what I did, I'm going to pay for it later. And 10 years is enough, you know, if I don't see the industry changing. And honestly, like money didn't start coming around the wrestling business until 5 to 6 years after I stopped. And after that, you know, like AEW popped up, like a bunch of my buddies are on AEW and WWE. And they're like, dude, you would flourish right now. Cause like the style of wrestling that's going on right now is your style of wrestling. And I'm like, it's too late. I don't care anymore. Like, I don't feel like doing it. It's not my passion anymore. Like I don't feel like getting hurt every week and, you know, putting my body through that. So Even though it's just like, oh yeah, I could actually make money at it now. It's just like, but I don't care. And like,
Yeah.
for me, you know, what I want to do for a career has to be something I actually care about. And if I don't care about it, then it's just a job. It's not a career.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it is interesting how that translates to art too, because it's like there's so many times where there's something contagious about art that you're really into, and it's like this weird thing of like half the game of doing art and illustration is like finding the thing in the illustration or the art that you're doing that you love, and that somehow translates to people. And it's kind of interesting because it's like if you care too much and you're not having fun with it, like it can, people can tell, you know.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's like, you know, that goes with like philosophy of books. Like,
Yeah.
you know, if you're just making comics to make comics, I think that also translates to a degree to the
Yeah.
audience. And you know, if it's something you truly want to do, I think the fans can feel that and they appreciate that more in the work. But I mean, I don't know. That's me being like an art hippie, I guess. You know, like the essence of what you're doing. But that for me, it's really important. You know, like I was saying with comics, like regardless how difficult the page is, I love what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like I push through because I love comics so much, and I'm a storyteller just by nature. You know, even with wrestling is telling a story in a matter of 6 to 20 minutes or whatever. And so every time you have a match, it's a story. And that's just like who I am as a person. I love telling stories.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I think there's probably like a lot of crossover between between wrestling and comics.
Yeah, fan wise, definitely there's a lot of comic book fans that are wrestling fans. It doesn't always translate the other way though. Like a lot of wrestling fans know nothing about comics.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know, there's a meathead element in there that just love the physicality of it. So you don't get the superhero, you know, nature of it all. Like, but then the comic fans that love pro wrestling, that's why they love it. It's just like, it's live action superheroes. Why wouldn't I like this? They do super cool moves. They have finishers, you know, like if you're in your video games, you get that element of it. You know, it's just like, oh, you beat the guy with this. That's how you beat him, you know?
That's awesome. That's like such a fascinating history. Sorry, go ahead.
There's a lot of comics, like wrestling comics as well. I was just talking to, do you know Jay Gonzo?
No.
Have you seen him? Oh, he's got a book. What's it called? I can't remember the name of it. It's Luchadors, and
Okay.
it's like one of the most beautiful books. And he's local here in AZ. I'm surprised you didn't see him at one of the conventions, but we're looking at getting him on. But he's got a beautiful book about you know, a pro wrestler and everything. And he's not the only one. I've seen a number of like wrestling books and stuff. So.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of them. One of my buddies, Mike Kingston, he does Headlocked, which has been going on for quite a while. My first printed work, published work, is from Headlocked. I did a pinup for him, and I did quite a few pinups for him over the years. And then Daniel Warren Johnson, of course, is doing a series called Do a Power Bomb, and it's beautiful.
I've heard of that.
Like,
yeah.
Over the pandemic, he became a comic book fan and just is obsessed with it. And he's obsessed with like the good stuff too. Like he really loves like Japanese wrestling, which is like, it's pretty hardcore. And then so if you look at his comics, like it's so clear, like that he's a true fan. Like the energy, obviously, like you guys seen his work, right? So the energy that he puts into every single book that he does, like it feels like there's even more so inside of this comic book. And it's very true to what you would see in the ring.
Yeah.
And he's just such an amazing artist that he picks these like picture perfect angles in which to take shots. And it's just like, wow, like that's beautiful. Like it's so insane. Like he gets this, you know, ground eye view of like someone jumping out of the ring, outside of the ring onto their opponent or into the crowd. And it just looks like the most bonkers batshit image you've ever seen. And it's just like, it's a moment in time that he can capture. And it's just like a freeze frame. And then other moments you see the impact. And like, that's something like I'm completely fascinated with art, is the ability to make something look like it's moving when it's a still image.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, so Gary kind of mentioned this, and I think it's a pretty good question. He said, I'd like to hear you talk a bit about what you learned in wrestling that you were able to apply to comic work, because that's kind of a crossover I would see there, in the sense of, like, when wrestling, you have to do a lot of showing up and exercising and conditioning and training and practicing. There's a lot of like art to the thing, and I'm wondering, like, if that built habits that then helped your comics. That's actually a really good question. So
sorry, I just saw Jim Lujan's comment. Welcome. I'm finally not in my car. Okay, I'm in my car, busted. Every time I've seen Jim on Gary's show, he is in his car, and I'm like, does that guy just live in his car? Like, what is anyway,
I think Jim has a commute, kind of like I do. So.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. As far as Gary's question, I learned a ton of stuff from wrestling, and like you said, there's a lot of physicality. You got to do a lot of exercise and whatnot. That actually helps with drawing figures. You know, it's just like, if you're constantly in the gym, you're constantly staring at yourself and each other. Like, wrestlers are just like that. Like, man, you're looking good. And like, you start talking about what the other guy's doing. Like, hey, how are you getting these muscles? Or you know, what are you concentrating on the gym? And so there's, like, you know, stuff like that. So it's just, you're constantly staring at yourself and you're staring at each other, and you just learn muscle structure that way. You know, it's just like, it's the easiest way of studying is like your obsession to be physically fit, and you're going to just know how to draw that muscle because you're staring at it every day and you're trying to improve it. And so that's one element. The other thing is storytelling. You know, like when you're putting the match together from start to finish, it's like, okay, if especially on the independent scene, and like this applies to comics as well, you want to translate your story to the entire audience, and you have to realize the majority of that audience has probably never heard of you. So you need to translate to them in that match every single time who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. What's the quickest way in order to do that? Okay, number one, entrance. When you come in, your expression, the way you interact with the crowd, that's going to dictate who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. The way you start the match, you know, are you the one being the aggressor? You're attacking. You know, you're not listening to the ref. All these types of things. There's these cues that you can do, and you're building that story. And also fight choreography. That's something that's really important with the style of books that I like to do. It's the style of wrestling that I like to do. It was just like, I want to tell a fun, fast-paced action story. And like, I want there to be emotion. I want there to be, you know, a connection with the crowd. You know, whether that be just like, I really like this guy, he's really funny, or this guy's a dick, I really like him because he's a dick. Like, those are parts of the stories that I actually like to convey. It's just like, you know, in pro wrestling, they say your best character is you amplified by 10. And so I'm a smart ass. I like to crack jokes, but I also like to do pretty things. I like to do cool moves. I like to be flashy. And so that's what I would convey in my matches, you know, and that's who I was as a person and then as a character, but tenfold. So for comics, it like really opens you up that you have to establish who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, what's the fastest way to do that. And so like if you pick up Second Shift trade paperback volume 1, number 1, the first issue was me literally stopping wrestling for 10 years and drawing comics again. So I always like to let people know, it's like, hey, you can see the transition in my work. This is me literally drawing again for the first time after 10 years. And then by the end of the trade paperback, it's more my style now. It's just like, yeah, my style is still changing, but by the end of that trade paperback, that's what my art looks like. And I've improved, and I've seen like the errors that I did in the first issue compared to how I'm doing stuff in the 5th issue until today. But in the beginning of that trade paperback, it's a quick establishment who the bad guy is right away, and then it's a quick establishment as to who the good guys are right away. So, you know, you take those cues from all those years of wrestling, putting matches together, and you can translate that into a story. So is it necessarily how comics are usually done? I don't know. But from what I could tell, it's just like, yeah, like through doing things or reading things and watching things for so many years, you know more than you think you know. So, like, for instance, going back to the wrestling side of things, when I started wrestling, when I started training, There's something called psychology, the psychology of a match. Well, why are you doing things? Why do things make sense? And they kind of, my school gave you basically a structure. Okay, this is how the framework of a match, it breaks down like this. And so after I started training, I found my old matches that I wrote down, because I used to write all the matches out for me and my friends, and we would read them, we'd memorize them, and then we'd perform the matches. I found a bunch of the papers, and all of the papers, all the matches that I wrote had psychology in it. How did I know that? I haven't taken any classes at that point. I was a kid in the backyard. Well, I watched wrestling ever since I was a little kid. So you understand, subconsciously, you understand how a match works. So when I did my first book, subconsciously I understood how comics work, because I've read them my whole life as well. So that's how I would just put comics together. Now, were there things that I really needed to know because I didn't know them subconsciously? Yeah, absolutely. There's things that I learned later on. Like there's things that, like the page turn, like in the first issue, it's like, oh, the big thing that happens right at the beginning of the story, it doesn't happen on a page turn. It's right there on the right side. It's like, like that's kind of like, it's an amateur move, but it's me learning as I'm going. So, you know, and it's much like wrestling training. It's like, yeah, you train because you want to learn the nuances. You may understand the overall structure, but you don't know the nuances of a match and putting it together and whatnot. And same with comic books. It's like, okay, I knew enough to put a comic book together, but I didn't know all the nuances of it. And that's me taking education into my own hands. You know, I didn't have a formal comic school or training that I did. I like I have a need to know more. So I'll read, you know, like Sean Gordon Murphy, like he used to have a DeviantArt page. He used to write like kind of like articles on his page. He'd write blogs, and I would always read them, and because he would be talking about the business and like, well, this is what I do. This is the reason why I do this. And so like reading, you know, these famous creators' work on social media, wherever they have it, I would absorb as much information as I could so I can learn how to make better comic books.
Nice. And I'd imagine like there's a bit of that, like in the sense of like to take on something like pro wrestling, you can't possibly totally know it till you do it. And so it's like you learn the structure and then you start doing it and you start perfecting and getting better and better. I'd imagine that would be the same for like comics too, where it's like, you know, you start your first comics and you learn so many things along the way, you know, like when you first think of something and then you have to draw it sequentially, it's just like a whole, you know, even when it comes to like a simple conversation sequence, just to like sequentially have it make sense is like a whole different thing in practice than in your head, you know? So I'd imagine like a lot of the dedication and practice and stuff would apply to comics too. Definitely. So I want us to dip into this technique you've developed called the slack technique.
Before we do that, Jim had a question. I don't know if it was related to wrestling or not. I don't really understand. I'm sure Scott does though.
Yeah. So a receipt is basically, all right. So when you're wrestling, there is amount of force you're using in a punch, a kick, or anything like that. A receipt is basically if you get stiffed or potatoed. So if you get punched for real or kicked for real, like real bad, like it's like you kind of get knocked a little loopy, you're allowed a receipt. A receipt is I'm going to punch you, or I'm going to kick you, or I'm going to do something back to you in order to pay you back for what you just did to me. So I have given a receipt a couple of times for sure. I was known, my wrestling name was the Professional Scott Lost. So the professional refers to my favorite wrestler, who is the Hitman Bret the Hitman Hart. And so another word for Hitman is professional, like from the movie. So I was the Professional Scott Lost because I patterned how I wrestled initially off of him. And this kind of translates to comic books as well. So when I first started wrestling, I was just basically a Bret Hart clone. I was doing everything that Bret Hart did. I did everything how he did it to the T. And then just much like art, you can copy someone. So like my initial art style is Jim Lee clone. And so after a while, you as an artist, it just starts unfolding. You become who you are. Like just, you have to. That's just
Yeah.
how it works, you know. Like, you can try to fight it as much as you want, but there's just going to be nuances that you do in the ring or on the paper that your favorite creator did or didn't do, and they're just going to be your own thing, you know, like over time. So anyway, all that to say, I was very professional in the ring. I had a very, like, it was really tight how I would strike, and it looked 100%, you know, like 95% real, 100% real, depending what I was doing. But who I was wrestling would not complain about it. They'd be like, yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly how you're supposed to do it. So, like, that was kind of who I was as a wrestler. Everyone knew me as, like, oh, he's like a ring general. He takes charge a lot. But it's always safe. You know, everyone's going to come out fine at the end of it. So, but yeah, every once in a while I'd wrestle someone, and there was this one guy. He's one of my buddies. He was just younger and excited, I think, to wrestle me. And he did this, like, jumping heel thrust kick and just caught me right in the mouth. And I, like, flew out of the ring as part of I was like, okay, well, all right. So I got out of the ring. And then, so the next thing that was supposed to happen was he was supposed to baseball slide out. You guys, I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah.
So he's in the ring. So, like, this is ring level. I'm on the floor. And so he would basically baseball slide into my chest. So as he went to slide, I caught his legs. This was all part of it. And I spun him around. So his face was now outside, and I flipped him over. And what I was supposed to do was, it's called a tie clinch. So, like, it's like you grab the guy behind the head like that. And I was going to lift him up chest first and pull him down into the apron so he would land flat on the apron. And it looks pretty devastating. But what I did instead was I kicked him in the face. So, and then he looked at me. So, like, he's there and he gets kicked in the face and he looks at me like, and I'm like, that's a receipt. And then I threw him back into the ring, and that was one of them. So yeah, and just, you know, if someone's working a little stiff, a little stronger than I would like, I would potato them a couple of times with punches, and my punches were pretty good. But if I wanted to let them know, hey, you need to calm down, I would just punch them a little harder in the face, and then they get the message. And, you know, it's like, professionally, it's like, I'm not taking advantage of you, I'm not hurting anyone, but it's just to let them know, calm down, it's okay. Like, you don't have to be overly aggressive in this moment. It's okay. You know, as the match progresses, then if it gets a little stiffer, then I don't mind. It's just like, this is the culmination of the match. This match needs to look good. Like, when this is viewed by the audience and on film, people need to go, oh shit, like, things really started ramping up. You build, and you get the climax, the end of the match, and it's just one guy destroys the other guy, and that's the end of the match. So it's just all on where that type of thing happens in the match is when it's important. And so when that guy kicked me in the mouth, it was like, this is the beginning of the match. Like, it's too much. You're doing too much right now. So yeah, it was fine. That was the only receipt. He got the message. Everything was fine after that.
That's interesting. I didn't know anything about what a receipt is. So I learned something new. That's awesome. That's kind of a good code to have too, professionally, where it's like, hey, if you behave, I'll behave. But if you're gonna misbehave,
totally. Yeah. It's like, if you want to have a good match, let's have a good match. Like, don't fuck around.
Yeah.
Like, let's get this done. If you had something happened at home, I'm sorry that happened to you, but we're not doing that. That's not what's happening here. So.
I love it. That's awesome. Okay. Slack method. Scott, anything before we get into the Slack method? Scott.
Which Scott? No, I'm anxious to get into Slack method. I just wanted to get Jim's question out of the way because I thought it had to do with wrestling, so I figured
it's a good one. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, so Scott, like, when you started comics, what was your process and how did it evolve? How did you develop the Slack method, or have you used it the whole time, I guess?
No. Oh,
okay.
Man, I was wicked slow. I'm much faster now, but so I was working on, you know, pencil to paper when it first started. Obviously, we don't have the technology that we have now at the rate that it costs now. Like, I work on an iPad 7. I used to work on an iPad Pro 1, I killed that thing basically. I used it until it was slow and not moving. Didn't have a lot of money at the time, so I got the 7, which I could still use my original Apple Pencil. And so it's a little bit slower. I actually need to upgrade it pretty soon.
So Scott, hold on a second.
Yeah.
So you were working on iPad 1, because I had an iPad 1, and there's no pressure sensitivity.
I was working on an iPad 1 with an old stylus. Then years for like I was using a stylus for it, and the work was not good, but it was cool to do, and people appreciated that I was working digitally. And then I moved years later. I moved to the iPad Pro one. So
Right.
at the time the 2 had just came out, and one of my studio mates, I was just like, hey, if anyone wants to sell their 1, if they're going to get the 2, I'll buy it off you. And she was just like, hey, yeah, I'll sell it to you. Like, are you serious? Do you want to buy it? I was like, hell yeah, I want to buy it. How much you selling it for? And she was like, $200. And I was like, done. Can't take it back. And so I gave her like the money right away. And
For
because
iPad
at that time,
Pro?
iPad Pro.
Yeah,
so that's like $1,000 machine.
Yeah,
at the time.
that's what I paid for mine.
Yeah,
but I also had an iPad 1, and I thought you said you were working on that, because there was like 0 pressure sensitivity. It wasn't.
Oh no,
there's no way.
I did some work on it, but it was very basic. It was like a heavy cartooning style, like the style that I use. There's no way I could work with that. So my studio mate, she sold me the iPad Pro. Yeah, when the new one came out, the 2nd generation, then it was like $800, but I was like 200, like that's crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was working pen to paper, pencil to paper for the longest time, and being away from comic books and cartooning for so long, like it was just a learning process. It's like, how do we even do this? So my writer, E. Bronson, he's actually a former pro wrestler as well. So we got to hanging out, over the years. Obviously, he was a huge comic book, Bruce Lee, basketball fan. So, like all the stuff that I love outside of wrestling, he was a fan of as well. And so he's like, yeah, I'm actually a writer. And so he would send me stuff, and I'm like, man, this stuff's pretty good. And so when I was winding down my wrestling career and I wanted to make comic books again, we started talking, and I kind of gave him and one other guy a tryout, and I was like, these are what my characters are like. These are their personalities. Here's their hopes and dreams. Put them in a restaurant. Have them have a conversation. Let me hear what that sounds like. And then he came. The other guy sucked. And then the other guy, and then my writer came back with the scene with my 4 characters having a conversation that I didn't write. I was like, whoa, like, what are they saying? Like, this is them. Like, this is them having this conversation. And, drawing my own stuff over the years when I was a little kid, and like my early 20s when I was still wrestling, I was trying to juggle both of them. And that's when I knew I couldn't do both.
Yeah.
But going back and like seeing those pages and reading the script from that issue that I was working on, I was like, I'm not a writer. Like, these are my characters and I know who they are, but I'm not a writer. I don't know how to do this at this point. Like, this isn't something that I would buy and go, this is good. I'd go, this is shit. Like, I would never buy another copy of this. So like, I knew I had to enlist a writer. And so when I was talking to my now writer, he was always asking me, oh, hey, do you want to draw my books? And I'm like, well, I got to draw my books, and I can't do 2. I was like, but hey, do you want to write my book? And he was just like, yeah. And so that's, when we got to talking about doing a script together. So we were both brand new to this. Like, we didn't know what we were going to do. So I was like, well, all right, well, let's do kind of like a skeleton of where we want the series to go. And so we were like, okay, issue 1, this happens. Like, okay, I want the first story arc to be 5 or 6 issues. And I was like, well, I want the first issue to be like this. I want the second issue to concentrate on their day job stuff. Third issue, we get back to the superheroing more, and so it was kind of like I had this pattern of superheroing, day job, superhero, day job. So that way people, and that's what Second Shift is about, minimum wage superheroes. So
it's such a good premise.
We kind of laid it out, and then we laid out the first 25 issues. And I was like, oh man, we have so much history here, planned out. And so I was like, okay, well, let's start writing the script. And then so he wrote the story, but never wrote comics before. So he was sending me essentially them in prose. he was just writing everything out, and I was reading it like a book. And as I was reading, I was doodling on the script, like panels. I was like,
Yep.
this is how I see that. And then we got to the point where we had done multiple issues, and I wanted to start doing stuff for the website. And it was like content exclusive to my website. And so I had another friend who I had met who was also a comics writer, and he did a short story for me, and he formatted it like a comic book writer. And so when I was reading it, I'm like, this reads so clearly. He gives me the page, panel count, everything. And so I was like, this was so much faster. And I went back to my writer and I was like, dude, you need to learn how to do this a different way, because what was happening was the first issue was like, I think 24 to 26 pages. The second issue was 21. The third issue was like 25. And then
Yeah.
like, by the fourth issue it was like, dude, this is 28 pages. I'm not fast. Like, we need to do something better. And I was like, what's happening is I'm translating this as I'm reading it, but I'm ending with a crazy page count. And I'm like, so number one, we can't do page counts this high. It costs too much money to print these comic books and have this crazy page count. Two, I'm not fast enough to do these crazy high page counts. And three, when I'm laying these out, what ends up happening is we end up shredding them. We ended up like, you have to rewrite the story. So then all of those thumbnails that I drew to get this page count are now gone and useless. So I have to redraw those. I'm like, we're killing time that neither one of us have. So he learned how to do the comic book way of writing. So, you know, anyone that's listening to this, and if you are starting your comic books, please learn how to write in the comic book format. It's just so much easier.
Yes. And also like realize like most actions, like even in a conversation sequence, most actions require a new panel. Don't forget that.
Right. Yeah, you can't do two movements in one unless you're doing a quick shadow movement of the head or something like that. But overall, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were both learning as we went, and you know, like we figured out, okay, we got to do this better because this is killing time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, fast forward, working more digitally, this is actually where I started using the method. And it was like, okay, I have my iPad. Number one beautiful thing about working digitally first is if you draw a character and it looks great, but it's too much to the left, you can just grab it and move it.
Yep.
Like if I did that on a page, it's like, I really love the way that looks. And like to the point where you're like, am I going to sacrifice this composition just because I don't want to redraw that? And I don't know if I'll ever be able to redraw it that well. And so a lot of times you unfortunately sacrifice that character, erase it and redraw it, and it's never the same. Anyway, going on to the Slack method specifically, I was just like, okay, number one, my time is getting cut in half, like instantly. Working traditional to digital, it's like I'm taking at least 20 hours per page. It's now cut to 10, like instantly it's cut to 10. And then like there's other, like, I'm like, how else can I work faster? Like,
Yeah.
what can I do? And like where I got the nugget of an idea was Jim Lee. He had like a live stream that he was working on, or there was like an interview or something like that. And he said that he actually works on multiple pages at once physically. Like if you watch Jim Lee streams, it's always traditional. And I was like, he's working on multiple pages at once. And he goes, yeah, he goes, you know, I just didn't feel like working on that today. So I laid the whole issue out already. So, I liked that page. So I just started working on that. And like, for me, it like never crossed my mind to jump pages. It's like, no, you got to like do it in order. Like, and then after that, just that seeing him do it once was enough for me to go, I can 100% do that. And like, how can I make that beneficial? And because like the thought process was, well, you just got to get it out of the way because you're going to have to draw it anyway. So why would you not just stick with it and finish it and just move on to the next page?
Yeah.
So the more I thought about it was, it's a waste of time. Because if you don't feel like working on something, like, have you ever been given like chores to do or a homework assignment or a bunch of homework assignments, right? And you do the one you're the most comfortable doing first, right? And you always save the worst for last, more than likely. And that's like, that was my thought process on it. It was just like, well, I'm like, I don't know. Like it just makes sense to do everything because you have to do it all. But But the idea was, well, I'm going to knock out the stuff that I want to do faster. So let me apply that to comic books as well. So I just learned over the years, just constantly work on the thing you want to work on that day. Every day is a new evaluation. It doesn't mean every day you want to work on that thing. It means today you want to work on that thing. So for me, it's just more often than not, I want to work on characters. Like it's the human interaction, the human action. Like that's the stuff that's important to me in comics. So that's the thing that I want to draw. It's not always the case. Like, you know, if you're only drawing the humans in your books, at the end, all you're going to have is backgrounds. So that's not what I'm saying. It's like, what do you feel like doing today? Could you work on the backgrounds today? I think I could actually. Today seems like a good day. I think I actually want to work on it. And in those days where you find that inspiration to work on backgrounds, that's the thing you should work on all day. Like if you can, like just knock out as many backgrounds as possible, because tomorrow might not be that day. You know, the next day you might not want to draw a background. It's the last thing you want to do. And so you need to take advantage of that inspiration when it hits you. So if it's a background day, do as many as you can, knock them out, because guess what? The next day, all you have is figure work left. And it's just like, oh man, I'm going to bang 2 pages out today because all that's left is characters. Characters are fun to do, super easy. Why not? So that's what the Slack method is. The Slack method is it's a Scott Lost advanced cartooning method, or the accelerated comic method. You can flip-flop the A's and the C's however you like, whatever you prefer. But it's basically to get you as the artist to work faster and always be working on something that you want to work on. Because number one, it's more fun that way. Like if you're working on something you want to work on, you're inspired, you're moving quicker. But if you're working on something you don't want to work on, you're dragging your feet. You're it's a slog to get through. If you don't want to work on backgrounds, it normally takes you 5 hours or something like that. It's going to take 10, right? Like 7.5 to 10 to do those backgrounds, because you're fighting through it. It's not something you really want to do. So it's making you slower. So with this method, it's the idea that you're always working on something that is in the forefront of your mind, the thing that's giving you inspiration, and that therefore you're moving faster. There is no slowdown time. And that is an ultimate benefit if you're someone that is limited on how much time that you have to work on your book. So like if making comic books, doing cartoons, whatever you're working on, whatever your passion project is, if that's not your main function, if that's not your main job, then you have a very limited time on when you can do that. So my method is to always have you working faster, optimizing all of the time that you have to work on your projects, because more than likely you don't have all day to work on them. You have a very small amount of time, and you have to fit in as much as possible.
That's a really interesting technique. I instantly think of the issue that would arise with myself, where it's like, yeah, I think I might end up in a scenario where it's all backgrounds, but you make a compelling case, because I definitely have had those days where it's like, I don't want to do backgrounds, but I can, you know, like you're having a strong drawing day where you can draw anything.
Yes.
Whereas there's those other days where you're just like, I don't know if I can draw everything. I can draw this thing. And I could see where it would be beneficial, so that you're not kind of having that slog of like powering through it. That's really an interesting technique.
Yeah, for me, I'm the kind of person that likes to get the tough stuff out of the way first. So it's kind of like all downhill from there. So I would probably, but there are times, like you said, that I just not in the zone or like whatever to do backgrounds or that type of thing. But typically I want to get that stuff out of the way. So that's done. I'm out. That's, you know, so now I can just move on to some other stuff. So that's, I think, how I would kind of approach it. But I guess I'm interested in kind of how it works, as far as, because what you do is you work, you do all your thumbnails, and then you're kind of working off your thumbnails, right? You're kind of, aren't you blowing those up
and then
should I pull up the?
Yeah, Josh, you have the slideshow there. So these are actually, this is the issue that I'm working on. So this is second shift 13. These are pages 8 through 15. So I work. I have these sheets right here, and it's my thumbnails. This is how I work on the issue. So I'll just do a screen cap of my writers pages, and I'll throw them right here on the page. I'll create the thumbnails. I'll keep them moving. So I actually thumbnail if I have a clear vision as to what I'm reading and how I would lay it out, I'll lay out pretty tightly. Like a lot of the information's already there. Like you can see it's pretty clear as far as I can tell. I mean, I don't know how you guys are with it.
For thumbnails, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So if you flip through the next one, here we go. So this is 1 through 7. So you'll see in the first box there, it's blacked out because that is the credits page. And so this way, my pages are always in order. You always get the page turn where you want it. And that's number one. You definitely want to do something like that. And so I'll go that way. So number one, I can do my double page spreads, my splashes, the page turns where they need to be. And what happens in this stage is, like, I'll try to lay the whole issue out first just to make sure it's all done. But sometimes, like, inspiration hits me as I'm working. And since this is a digital method, I can zoom in really close and get it into much detailing as I want on these thumbnails. So my pages here, these are 17 by 11, and I actually have the guides as well, like the blue line marks underneath where your margins need to be. So I actually have a page that will kind of allow me to keep the action within those lines. And you can go to the next one.
So each one of these individual pages are
11 by 17.
11 by 17. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you could see it here on this page. You can actually see the blue line markers underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm keeping all the action where it needs to be.
Okay.
And then you can go to the next one. So I'll work this way first. So I'll thumbnail out the entire issue. And this is actually page 1. So the reason why this one is up here is to show you guys this is part of the Slack method right here. So I have the blue line page underneath. I have my panel borders, and you can see I've started to hop around on this page. During this time, I didn't want to work on backgrounds. I didn't want to get the perspective right on this fence that I'm doing, these buildings. Like, it's just like I didn't feel like messing with it. And like, as you can see, I didn't get very far on this page. And I started off on page 1. This is page 1. And then so you can go to the next one. I wasn't feeling it. I was like, you know what? I'm introducing this character, and I want to, I don't know, I feel like drawing action. So I jumped to the action page. This is actually the page I'm working on currently. So most of it's all worked out. As you can see here with the blue lines, it's just background elements that need to be worked on. So I did the bottom panel was first. Like, if you look at this page, I drew the bottom panel first because I was like, simple action, 2 characters running, 1 character passing the other one looks surprised. That's fun. The middle panel there, it was a background day. I was just like, I was getting over COVID. It was a slog. I was not active. I did not want to draw, which is rare for me. I always want to draw. But one of the first days back, I was like, yeah, I can draw buildings. Buildings are easy. Like, let me work on that. So that was one of those days where one of the things that artists don't like to draw, it was just one of those days where I felt like drawing it. I was like, yeah, it's simple. It's a lot of silhouetted buildings too. You get some windows and whatever. Just convey that the city's there, and we move on. And you can go to the next one. Excuse me. This one is actually the page I jumped to after the first page, because this one was the most interesting one in the book, like, in my estimation initially. The page after this, I actually had way more fun doing. I had a lot of fun doing this one, but the page after I found to be the most compelling, and the page after also. So these are the pages that actually got me into the flow of the book. My writer, he had this idea, like, he's seen it in many comics, like a circle motif in a book, and for like fight scenes and stuff like that. And it was a very Asian influenced design that he saw. And so he sent me some pages as examples, and I was like, okay, I see what you're saying. And so I was like, okay, my job is to use the circle motif, but do it in a completely different way, so it's not like aping what these other artists had done. It's just like, well, I don't want to lift anything from these, but I just want to gather inspiration. And so I was just like, I can do this overall circle pattern, but I can break it up and have each side mirror it. And if you look, it actually moves just like you would through a regular comic book. You start in the top left, you move to the right, then you move down to the right, down to the right. So it reads very clear as to what the action is. So the story, like, number one, like I said at the top of the episode, is storytelling is very important to me. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I want it to be very clear as to what's happening. yeah, so this is the page that got me out of that slog. So you can, and like it's very disheartening when you start an issue and you struggle right away. So like the first page, I was just like, I'm struggling to introduce this new character. Like it's not going the way I want it to go, and that can really kind of screw you up when you're first starting your book. So I was like, I need a win. I need something easy to like inspire me to keep rolling. And that's what this page did. It was just like, okay, cool. It's a bunch of action sequence. Like, okay, here's the silhouette in the top left corner. It's like, okay, that's going to be fun to do. It's like, okay, you need to get the right muscle structure and the form down, but the silhouette is what's important, and you know, it has to be clear. So once I started with that, and then I jumped to the middle, you know, it's like, okay, a couple of profiles. What's easier than profile shots? Profiles are easy. So I started doing those, and before I knew it, I was in a groove, and I knocked this page out pretty fast for what it was, you know, a 2-page splash. And it just had me rolling from there on out. Like right after I finished this page, the next page I think took me 14 hours, but it was also 14 panels. It was a crazy amount of panels.
Yeah.
And then the page after that was 3 panels, and I finished it in 6. So like there's times where you're moving super fast, you're moving super slow, but it's also like the amount of I take that back. Everything was really fast in these pages to do. They did take a tremendous amount of time, but I also have a tremendous amount of panels in those images, those pages. So, but everything was moving so much quicker than the time frame it took me to work on what I had done for page 1. You know, page 1 took, I would say page 1 might have been 4 hours with what little I had there, you know. And the blue line, that's just a transference of my thumbnails. So my process is, so I'll go to those 17 by 11 thumbnails. I'll go to that layer. I will select that page. I'll copy it. I'll open up a new page, an 11 by 17. I'll paste it in there, and then I'll blow it up to size, make sure everything's in frame where it should be, and then I'll start working. Okay, I'll do the panel layouts, the panel lines, and then I'll start working on characters on another layer. And so you have your initial line work down there, which is, you know, if inspiration hit, then a lot of the hard work is there. A lot of the skeleton of the characters, the composition, everything, it's already there for you. So a lot of that work has already been done. It's been done quick because it's in your thumbnailing process. So like you guys know, as artists, when you're thumbnailing, if you do all of your pages at once, you get in the groove, you get into a flow. So it's not a slow down like you starting a new page. It's like if you do your thumbnails page by page, there's a good chance you're not going to get in a good flow where you're knocking everything out. It's a slower process. So it's the ability to streamline everything to make sure you're getting things done in the fastest way possible, and that's even including in the thumbnail stage.
So I have a couple of questions. So
yes.
When you do thumbnails, do you do those sequentially?
Yes.
Like you
yes, I do. Because I'm reading the story. So that is the one thing that I do sequentially, like, you know, start on 1, go to 2, 3, 4, etc.
Right.
Because you're reading the story as you go. And then, but like, there'll be cheats as well, right? Like, it's like, okay, this is a scientist scene. This is the lab. So like, I've done it and I wrote lab. Because I didn't want to, at the moment, I didn't want to take the time to go through and like, okay, where's the cameras in this? Like, what's the angle I'm going to tackle on this? Like, sometimes your mind isn't clear as to the angle specifically, but you know, well, it's going to be a big panel. You know, it's like, okay, here's the exterior of the building, and then the rest of the page is just a giant shot of the lab. So, okay, well, I'm just going to write lab because I don't know what that is yet, but I need to move on. And so it kind of keeps you moving. But then the next page, you might read it and go, I know exactly what that looks like. And then you draw it like right away. You're like, yeah, this is the angle. This is the shot. This is the next shot. And so it keeps you moving, you know, just keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And then again, with the Slack method, the next day you might be inspired. You're like, I have a great idea for that lab shot now. And then so you can pick the angle and you can break it down exactly how you need it to.
So my next question, this is what I wasn't quite clear on before when I was watching you on Gary's stream, is that it looked like what I thought you were saying was that you have everything, basically say if it's a 22-page comic, you've got all 22 pages like on one file, and then you can see
Yes.
everything at once.
Yep.
But at some point, it sounds like you're taking that thumb that's laid out with all the other pages, and you're making it its own file.
Yes.
Correct. So
So yeah, the reason why you need to do that is because on the 17 by 11 piece of paper, your image is roughly that big.
yeah, I was that's where I was confused. Like, how big is this? Because I think I even asked him that thing.
Yes.
How
yeah,
big is your
actually,
file? Because I'm like,
Yeah,
if this is 11 by 17 and you've got 22 pages on a thing, I'm like, that's a massive.
Yeah, every
file.
time you do a brush
Oh.
stroke, it's just a pinwheel. Every time.
Yeah, that would be bonkers. No, man. So like, I will like. So you saw the spreadsheet. So it's about 8 pages. It's 8 pages
Okay.
unless it's the first page, because then you got that yeah. So you have these 8 images. So I can float. So what I do is I'll lay out all 20 to 24 pages,
Mhm.
and then I'll look at my main screen. Do you use Procreate, or what do you guys use?
I use Clip Studio Paint.
Okay, so
Or
Procreate,
Pro, I guess.
they have like, it's basically an open page, and it's just a bunch of thumbnails on there. So these 3 files, it's usually, if you're working, 24 pages, it's 3 files of 8, right? So I can flip through and I can go, oh, there's a lot of interesting stuff on this page specifically, these 8 photos or these 8 pages. So I can jump from those 8 pages anywhere. I could just scroll over, start working on that page. It's like, oh, that's pretty interesting. Scroll over, work on that. But what happens is, when you find a page that's really interesting to you, you'll start detailing all the character work out. And so I'm trying to see.
So you're not like, when you're getting to the detail stuff, you're not like, are you, say, you're at the point where you've separated the files, so you're not drawing faces, like one face on page 7 and then go into page 3 and drawing another face.
I can be.
Okay.
It's totally up to you. Like,
Yeah.
like what your flow is and what you're feeling like, that's how you should be working. So,
Right.
for instance, on this page, go back to this one. So on this page, this was where all the action was. So this is the stuff I was really interested in. So on the 17 by 11, I was just zooming in and I was working straight up on the thumbnails, because then when I copy any of these pages, like the second or third page, for instance, there on that are X'd out, when I copy that and paste that into a 11 by 17, so when I do so this is basically my pencils. When it's this tight, they're my digital pencils. They're not even thumbnails anymore. They're already done. So when I take them to 11 by 17, because you want to have the right resolution, because the resolution's like, it's going to be shit. Like if you try to just separate that somehow. So, but when you copy it and paste into 11 by 17 and blow it up, it's just like, okay, yeah, the lines are fuzzy, but it doesn't matter. This is just the pencil stage.
Okay.
So, but all the information's there already. Like most of your work's done. And so you can just start going straight into inks. And that's my process. Like even my digital pencils is actually an ink pen, because the clarity of line is better. You're not like, you don't need the rough pencil. Like that's not what you need anymore. You needed that before, is because you can't erase a pen, but digitally you can. So it doesn't matter. Just work in pen. And then so what happens is sometimes you can throw the perfect line and you can go like, that's a really good line. I'm actually going to use that for my ink page. And or you work on ahead and it's just so perfect. And you're like, I don't even need to clean that up. It's already clean because you've drawn with your ink pen. So for me, that's another method of saving time. It's just like, you don't need it to look rough. You don't need to try to fool people to think that it's a pencil, unless that's the style of your book. So, but like the end result that most of us want is a clean ink line. So I just work in ink, and I actually got that tip from Fiona Staples. Fiona Staples works that way with Saga. I was like, that's fucking brilliant. Yeah. Why do I need a pencil? You don't.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So anyway, but a lot of when you get pulled in to a particular page, like when working on your thumbnails, you can just be so interested in what's happening that you go in and you work out all of the kinks. It's like, okay, how would the body be formed, or the exact angle. You can work it all out at this small imaging. Excuse me, I've been talking a lot.
It's okay. It's absolutely fascinating, this method.
It's my obsession with time. Like, I'm someone that's obsessed with being as efficient as possible, because I always say you can always make more money, but you can never make more time.
Yeah.
So time is so precious that you have to be as efficient as you can at all times, and especially with drawing, because it was like when I was working a day job, I would have to steal time all the time. It was just like, okay, I get 2 15-minute breaks and I get an hour lunch. Okay, so that's an hour and a half every day that I can draw during the day. While I'm doing something that I don't want to do, how can I get more drawing in? And another method of that was I would get it to work early. I'm like, okay, well, if I leave at this time, I'll get it to work 30 minutes early. And I can sit there and draw uninterrupted, free and clear. That's another 30 minutes. So at the end of my workday, I've drawn 2 hours. Okay, that's me being efficient with my time, because, again, by the time I get home after the commute, cooking dinner, eating, cleaning up, starting to draw, then having to go to bed to do this all over again. How much time did I actually have? Okay, I got 2 hours at work, and I have 2.5 to 3 hours before I have to go to bed. So I got 5 hours a day to draw. So I have to maximize this as much as possible. And that's where, like, my obsession with creating the Slack method came into play. It was just like, I need to be more efficient at this. And how do I do that? Okay, if I can work on multiple pages at once and just kind of really focus on what I want to focus on, something that was mentioned on Gary's channel, so if you guys didn't watch that episode, is, well, what happens at the end when all that's left are things that you don't want to do?
Yeah, that's my biggest hang up on it would be, I would worry that everything left would be all the stuff all the frogs that you didn't want to eat or whatever,
Right. Well, the beauty of the method is, number one, there are going to be days when you do, let's say the frogs are those backgrounds. There are going to be days where you're like, everything's working. Okay, so those are the days that you need to realize, then I shouldn't be drawing humans, because I'm really good at drawing humans. That's one of my favorite things to do. So I don't need to do that today. What I need to work on is the backgrounds. So you have to make sure your priorities are straight when you're working on your books as well. And then look, let's say at the end, there are still backgrounds. That's what's left. All that's left is backgrounds. But you're almost done, right?
That's true. That's a big motivator.
How do you feel when you're about to finish an issue? You want to finish it.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to bang these backgrounds out because it's the only thing I have to do left. So even in the end, at the end result, even though it's the last thing that you wanted to do, you're still going to do it faster than you would in the beginning. Because in the beginning, it's a slog. It's not something you want to do. It's something that's deterring you from working on that page, or you're just dragging your feet through the mud. But at the end, everyone just wants to finish. So even if it is the worst thing that you have to draw that issue, you can do it faster than you did it before. That's for sure.
That's true. There is that desire to finish kind of motivation that comes at the end. So even worst case scenario. What do you think, Scott? Scott,
Yeah.
up above me. No.
I was going to say, I would imagine that it's probably a good motivator too, because when you are working sequentially, say, oh, I got 5 pages done, and then you've got another 20 pages or something to do. But this way, it's like, in one way, it's like you can't really say, well, I don't have any pages done, but I've got a good majority of each. I've got some of each of these pages. So as a whole, I think it just would seem like you accomplish more. I'm thinking, and I'm definitely going to put this into practice for my next issue. So I'm curious what my experience will be, but it just seems like it seems to me like it'll look like you have completed more than if you were just going sequentially or tricking your mind. It's like, oh no, you see, instead of one finished page, you see a number of pages that are close to being finished. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. There'll be days where you'll be able to knock out two. Like, I don't know how fast you are. If I could finish 2 pages in a day, I'm friggin' so happy.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
there
That's
will
good
be
output.
days where you've knocked out so much on multiple pages that you'll be able to finish multiple pages in a day, and that's a great feeling. It's just like, okay, I had 4 pages done, but now I have 7 pages done, like in a day, and it's just like, what happened? And it accelerates everything. There is no slowdown. There is no drag. There is no lag. It's just you're always working on what you want to work on that day, and then at the end of the day, you're moving faster.
Yeah, and if you're because a lot of times if you are working sequentially, you might just be a day where you're just like, I just don't feel like working on this page. But you can see yourself, but like you said, but I can do this. I can go in and like spot blacks or something like that. That's like, it's mindless, and like that I can do.
Absolutely. And like, I don't know how much of the process you guys do yourselves. So I'm all about saving money and saving time. So I have guys. I have a guy that does not thumbnailing. I'm sorry, flatting for me.
Mhm.
But if the pages are easy, I can't, in good conscience, give it to someone and go, "I'm going to pay you money to do this," because I'm like, I can do this on another day. So like, or if there's a day where I need to do lettering, I'll do lettering. So like, I have multiple things that I can jump to beyond just penciling and inking. And so for me, that helps as well. It's just like, okay, well, that page is done. I'm just, like you said, you're like, I'm just not feeling it today. Every line that I throw down looks like crap. Like, it's not working. What can I do? You go flat. You always do something. The
Well,
Slack method is always making progress, always moving forward. Like the worst thing you can do is just waste time. So
Agreed.
if you can flat that day, flat that day. If nothing's working right, do something. You got to do something because time is precious. So like, get some flatting done, do some lettering, whatever it is.
so it's not limited to just penciling and inking. I mean, you're saying that like maybe your pencils and inks aren't done, but you may still be working on lettering even. Is that?
Lettering is usually the last thing I would
Yeah,
tackle.
I mean that's me too. So
but
I mean,
but I do have times where I do flat, because I'm like,
okay.
just nothing's coming out right. So I'll go to like a finished page, not just a
Yeah.
not a page that has like 1 or 2 panels done. Like,
Yeah.
My iPad only gives me so many layers. So,
Yeah.
but I'll do like, well, I can just flat the cover. The cover's done. So let me flat that and get that out of the way. And then I can send that to my colorist, because then now my colorist is working at the same time I'm working. And so at the end of the project, I'm not waiting for him to finish coloring 25 images. Well, now he only has to finish 24. So if I finish pages, I can send him his way.
Yeah.
And go, hey, here you go. And then like, my flatting always dictates time and day as well. So it's just like, oh, here's an outside scene. It's obviously nighttime, and I'll give him my notes or whatever, and I'll be like, just so you know, like I'll send him those thumbnails as well. And I'm like, just in case you want to see how the flow of the story is, here's the thumbnails. And like, the thing that I also do with those thumbnails is I'll copy the finished inks and I'll throw it on that thumbnail page sometimes. And then so when I send them to my colorist, he has finished lines basically to see what's coming up. And so everything's very clear for him. So it's just my obsession with time and time management and just efficiency. It's just like, okay, what's the quickest, best way to do this? And where I'm not like, like Scott, you do Kickstarters, so you're not waiting around for your colorist, like, or someone else that's part of the process. You're not waiting on anyone else because you've already thought ahead. Like, make sure you're just moving forward all the time.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm still like, I am intrigued by it, but I'm still I'm so stuck on the sequential.
Yeah, no, Gary, Gary Hodges, he's very much like that as well. Like, we've talked about it, and he starts at page 1 and he does page 1 till he's done, and then he moves to page 2. The thing with that is, with Gary specifically, he's very much like me and my buddy Keith in the sense that we're workhorses. We're determined to do this, whether we have someone over our shoulder or not. It's just like something we want to do. These are our creations. We're indie workers. We're indie,
Yeah.
indie creators. So we're motivated by our own deadlines. Gary's deadline is a page a week. At the end of the week, that page better be done. That's just how it has to be. Me, excuse me. It's a panel a day. It's like I have to do a panel a day.
Yeah.
So like usually by the end of the week, that page will be done, but it's all dependent on how many panels I have on that page. The double page spread, 24 panels on that. The next page was a single page that had 14 panels. So it wasn't I couldn't do the one a week because that's not how the panels dictated it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now some days I will do more than one. It's all dependent on how fast and how many panels are on that page. Like some days I'll do 4 or 5, some days I'll do 2, some days I'll do 1. But like by the end of the day, that one panel has to be done in order for me to keep producing more comics.
I think that's that it's interesting that you have that self-directed goal, that Gary has that self-directed goal. I think most of us, it's funny, the panel a day thing is something I've used for years because it's just a really good motivator. I know like a lot of people in our community have done something like the 100 days of making comics challenge where they'll, you have to spend at least a minimum of like 30 minutes a day working on comics.
Okay.
And the idea of that is like to have people start building the habit. But I do think like those kind of goals where you're like doing a daily routine where you have a daily expectation, it's almost required if you're going to be a cartoonist.
Absolutely.
It's like, because without drive and self-determination and kind of an ability to hold yourself to expectations, these things just don't get done. Yeah. But the technique, the Slack method, is really interesting. I love the idea of being able to approach your own work and be fully invested and into what you're doing every day. That's kind of a cool thing, because I definitely have days where it's just a slog.
Yeah, that's the problem, because I was also the same way. I would start on page 1, go to page 2. That's how I did it. That's how I did it. And it just wasn't efficient. It just wasn't efficient with who I am as a person and what I wanted to work on, and just how, like, Gary was probably a really good student. I was not.
So I wasn't either. Maybe that's what it has to do with it. I don't know about Josh, but because Josh is very productive. I don't think he needs to switch to the Slack method because he's very, he's pretty productive on his comic. Whereas me, it's like it's kind of a back burner type thing. Yeah. But I don't. I'm at the. I just finished the second to the last issue, and I haven't started on the next one yet. And I want to start. I want to get. It's the last issue. And it's a bigger. It's going to be a bigger issue than the past ones. And I just want to get it done. So I mean, to me, this is really intriguing. I think this is going to help me. Up my productivity on it.
Something else that'll help with on your issues as well is, I mean, like, and it's not everyone, but like at the beginning when you're starting a comic, there's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of enthusiasm. You're excited about what you're doing. It's a new issue. It's a new project. And then some artists powder out by the end. It's not as good. Your work isn't as strong. You're kind of just trying to finish. And if you bounce around, you won't necessarily get that excitement only in the front part of the issue.
Yeah, it's true.
You'll have some of that energy towards the back. If there's more interesting stuff going on in the back of that issue, it's going to show there, because that's probably one of the first things you worked on. Like, as you guys saw in those thumbnails, for me, it was the fight scene in that issue that I was most excited to do. And so when I was drawing it, there was a lot of energy. There was a lot of enthusiasm in those pages. And as it went on, it just got more and more. And so those pages that you're less interested in, it's going to show in those ones, but they're more than likely going to be the most uninteresting parts of that story. So, by doing it sequentially, it's like you might run into that a little bit when you don't want to. So even Josh, like, you being a productive person and you don't really need the Slack method, it might be fun just to try out, just because you can see how fast you could potentially be.
Yeah, I think I'd have to do it on a shorter project, because on like the doing that with 230 pages seems tough.
And also, I think where you might, I think the Slack method, and correct me if I'm wrong in your experience, Scott, but I think it may work better for like an independent indie comics. Whereas if you're working for a publisher, it might be harder to sell the idea of I'm going to give you this stuff piecemeal.
Yeah.
Rather than
Yeah. Okay. So the answer to that is it would work the same, because the first thing you do is your thumbnails.
Yeah.
So what the company wants to see is your thumbnails. They want to see your storytelling. So if you're working digitally like I do, like you don't have to, obviously. This method can be done physically. I mean, Jim Lee uses a version of it, but he's Jim Lee. He's just fucking awesome. So he just does whatever he wants to do. Yeah. But like the difference is with the thumbnails, the publisher or your editor, they can see everything that you have planned. They don't care when you get it done. Like they care about when you get it done. They care when you get it all done, but they don't care in which order you do it. Like, as far as I know, as far as what I can tell is you just got to get the issue done. You have this deadline when you're supposed to be finishing these pages. But if they see from start to finish where the story ends, when it starts and when it finishes, that's what they want. They want to see, okay, yeah, I see the direction. I like this. Hey, can you tweak this? Yeah, it's the thumbnail part. I can tweak anything you want. You know, let's make sure the story is where you want it to be, and then once it is, I'm going to start doing what I do, which is drawing the book.
Yeah, I think that's true for the publisher. But as far as, say, if you're working like, say, at a Marvel title or something, and you're penciling, and then you got to get, I mean, if you're using the Slack method, you may not have all the pencil pages done until you've got a decent amount of them, and then you're giving your inker like, okay, here's 20 pages, rather than
not at all.
Okay.
No. Like, so if you saw by my thumbnails, I finished 5 pages.
Right. Okay.
And it was because those were the ones that were the most interesting for me to do.
Okay.
So as soon as I finish one, I would send it off to my inker. You know,
so you don't you do work with an inker, right? You say
no. Most of the time I work all digital now.
Right.
So there was actually a part when I was transitioning from pencils to digital pencils and then traditional inks, because I wanted to have physical pages.
That's what I'm doing right now, at least as far as this comic, because I've up until this issue, I did everything traditionally, and I still want to ink traditionally on this issue just so it matches the look of the rest of it.
Totally.
Now the next book,
Young used when he was penciling full time.
Yeah.
I know him and Ryan Stegman. I think even Ryan Otley now might use that technique. So they'll lay everything out digitally, print out in blue line, and ink traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of this other stuff that I do, comic stuff that isn't part of that, that project, I do ink digitally now.
Okay.
But so in the future I may do all my books totally digital, but at least for this one, just to keep the style, because no one's going to tell if they can't see how you created the pencils, if it was if it was traditional or
and then
digital,
you have those originals to sell later on, or whatever the case
I don't know if I could, I don't know how much I could sell, but I do like that idea. So if the book ever does blow up or something, then I've got pencils that that I can sell. But,
I think I have the first 7 or 8 issues of Second Shift. There's the one that's full on traditional, and then there's, I think 7 and 8 are digital pencils and traditional inks.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the end, so what had happened was at the end of issue 8, I was like, okay, so for me, I like starting the issues hot, and I like ending with cliffhangers, like just to make sure people are moving to the next issue. It's like, yeah, that story's done now, but guess what? This is the next story, and here's the cliffhanger for it. So in issue 8, I had done my traditional, or the digital pencils, traditional inks, and I was like, shit, I didn't do the cliffhanger for this book. And then so I did it all digitally, and I was like, I don't want to ink this. It's already done. Like, I hate that I have to print this out and redraw it, basically. It's already done. Like, I don't need to do anything. And so that last page, I was like, I'm just going to do it digitally. And I sent it to my colorist, and he had it done the next day. And I was like, oh, shit, that was just so much faster.
Yeah.
So with issue 9 is where I was just like, I'm switching to full-on digital. And after a while, your style, like, I know exactly what you mean. Like, stylistically, there's a difference between traditional and digital. Like, I don't know that I'll ever get it 100% to look like my traditional pencils, but it's pretty damn close now because it's all I do. And I've learned how to vary my line quite a bit to simulate how I would do it traditionally. But the one thing I do like to do, because I'm in the same thought process of you, I love having originals. Like, because just like you, hey, if my books blow up, I want to have something to go, one day I can sell this for a good amount of money because the book's really popular now. There's not a lot of pages that exist. The new thing that I'm doing is I'm printing out splash pages and inking them traditionally. I'm still inking traditionally the covers. So covers exist, splash pages exist. And I think I want to do it with like certain pages of characters' first appearances. So like there's like in that book specifically, that double page spread, I'm printing that out and I'm going to ink that traditionally. I'm like, that's a cool page to have. Like actually, I think maybe even that whole fight scene, or actually the climax of that fight scene, I'll probably print out and ink traditionally because they're just good to have, you know, and you never know. So I'm a guy that likes to have my cake and eat it too. And so like that's my way of doing it. It's just like, okay, I'm gonna work digital for all these other pages that kind of don't matter. Like, who's gonna buy this page? No one's gonna buy this page, but someone would buy a splash page or a double page splash. Like that's of interest to you know fans. So you know you want to make sure you have that as well.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love the idea of being able to work traditionally or digitally. Like the current book I'm working on is all digital. The other book I'm working on is pretty much all traditional, and it's like it's fun to kind of vary, like depending on what works best for the look you want for your book.
Yeah.
But it's like, but it is cool. Like the book I'm currently working on, it's interesting because I've been working traditionally for a while, for a number of years, and so it's been interesting the technique I've been using where it's just like the pencils are the inks and it's done. Like when it's penciled, it's done. That's it, that is insanely time saving. Like it's a really efficient way to work.
It was hard for me to switch completely. It was a struggle, but I remember one of the last pages that I was inking traditionally, I was looking at the stuff that I was inking. I'm like, it's done. It's already done. Like this is madness. Like
why be redundant?
Yeah, you know, it's just like why Jack Kirby never inked his own stuff. He goes, I already drew it once. You want me to draw it again? You know, it's just like, man, if like, look, if I could, if my books got to the point where I was making good chunks of change off of them, I would hire an inker. I would totally hire a traditional inker, and we would just split I'd be like, look, I'm gonna hire you. We're gonna split pages like they did back in the day. You know, it's like, granted you're working off of Blue Line, but if you're going to work with me, that's part of the deal. Like I want half of the pages, you know, and you keep the other half, and we'll work out the money amount like in the appropriate manner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. It's funny because I like doing everything.
I've never been like that. Like, like it's always interesting to me when I do see artists that are like, I have to do everything, you know, and like number one, like I said, I'm not a writer. Like, you know, and you might be a really good writer. I'm not sure.
No,
but like,
I write, but I'm not good.
Josh is good.
Okay, good. Yeah, I saw Corey shaking his head there.
Josh is an incredible writer.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. So, but like, I know I'm not. Like, I'm good at rewriting. I can read my writer's script over my characters and go, he wouldn't say that.
So you're a good collaborator, editor, and dreamer.
Yeah. Like that's where my strength would be. But I know that my weakness would be writing. You know, it's just like he does stuff that I would never think of doing. Like he had, we had a villain in issues 9 and 10. He like put stuff with that character in issue 3, and I was like, I would never have thought to do that. You know, it's just like, yeah, because you're not a writer, dumbass. Like know your weaknesses. So like, when you're putting these books out, it's worth fans reading. You know, it's worth people giving you the $4 or $5 an issue that you want from them. And it's just like, okay, well, if you're not good at writing, make sure you're finding someone that is, because I've read many a book where indie creators thought they could do everything.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you kind of did everything, but like, I wouldn't give you more money for it. It's just like, you have to know where your strengths and weaknesses are. And like, for me, it's that. And like, I'm not great at coloring. I like tried my hand at it for a little bit and I started getting better. But then it was one of those things where, yeah, this is fun, but it's eating up too much time for me specifically.
Yeah.
And like again, time is so precious. So it's just like, okay, well, my colorist is really good at it and I'm not. So why not have him do it? Pay him his fee and like make sure I'm putting the best product out that I can.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, because like while I'm a person who likes to do everything, I'm collaborating now with a writer on a different book. But it's like I've put out 2 graphic novels that were written and illustrated by myself.
That's
But
cool.
still, it's like I really would encourage anybody watching. It's like, if not everybody's like that, like. and honestly, there's a big benefit to working with a writer right now, where it's kind of fun just having the visual part and just the collaborative part and the kind of taking the script and visualizing it. And that actually is a really fun thing to have, like this one burden that's not over me, because it's like, okay, we have a finished script, so it's just kind of working it out. And honestly, collaborating with multiple people. Scott's talked about this recently too. I think, as has Corey. I think as I've gotten older, collaboration seems more and more fascinating and kind of cool, because of the idea of like just limited time, like you were saying, where, I mean, how much time do we have as creators? Like, and you finish a few comics, you realize how long they take. And it's like, if we want to put out a lot of books, I think having a team or like a collaboration is not a bad method at all.
And you get something different than just what's happening in your brain.
Yeah.
Like your own ideas are your own, and like you're going to have some great ones. And but then like I'll get stuff from my writer. I'm like, oh man, what a great idea. That would have never crossed my mind in a million years. And we even did one. We did an issue of Second Shift. So every October, I don't do the Inktober, I do Drawtober. I create my own prompt list and I use that list to create a comic book. So every October, I have a new comic book out. Excuse me. The latest one I did was, well, not the latest. This one was actually Wanderers 2022. I did Wanderers of Melisande. That's my anthropomorphic dinosaurs versus humans book. But the 2 previous years, I did Second Shift issues 11 and 12. Now, 11 was completely me. It was just I thought of an idea that I could draw out for the whole month, and I wrote it. And I used my writer to collaborate a little bit on it. I was like, hey, he kind of worked as a kind of like an editor almost on it.
Yeah.
He goes, hey, like, what do you think of this type thing? But then issue 12, I was like, I'm going to draw this, but you write it. So we kind of did Marvel method. I was like, I plotted it out. I thought the story, and I was like, here's the book, write the dialogue. Right. So then he sent me his initial script, and I was like, this isn't what I was thinking. I was like, let me try something else. I was like, hold on. So I wrote my script over my art and I sent it to him. And I was like, okay, now do your version of this. So you have your original script. I have my script. Make them one, or just read this and see what comes to your mind. And honestly, it was one of the best scripts we did. Like, I was like, this is really good. Like he souped up all of my writing. I was like, this is so much better. Like the characters just sound so much more refined than what I had done. But I had certain nuances in there that he didn't have in his original script. And he goes, this is really good. He goes, this bit of dialogue is actually really good. I wouldn't have thought to put something like that in there. And so it's just the collaboration of us kind of bouncing off of each other.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is what I had in mind. It's just like, okay, here's my impression of Jack Kirby. Stanley the shit out of this, jazz this up.
Yeah.
And that's what we did, and it was really fun. So, and that's just one issue that we did together. That's not our normal method, but it was just something fun to do. And just like the difference between what I read in his script and what I wrote in my script, and then what he finished with, it was just like, man, that's the best of both worlds right there. Because you just have two different perspectives on how to write something.
I think that's like I totally relate to what you're talking about, because I've had that with collaborations versus like doing everything solo. And I kind of think of it as like, it's almost like in music, there's like times where maybe you're just going to do like a Dylan song where it's just you and a guitar and you're the creator of the whole thing, right? And then there's times where you're going to play with a whole band, and like they're going to add stuff, and every musician adds stuff, and like you end up with this like song that's different than what you initially envisioned, but quite often it's better, or you push each other in different directions that like, arrive at different sounds than you'd achieve on your own. And I think collaborations are cool like that, where like like you can play off of each other's strengths and like build on each other's contributions and stuff, and kind of make this thing that might be different, but it ends up being quite often better than what you envisioned. Although I will say there's still strength to just the power of being able to just do the whole thing.
Totally. No, I would never discount a creator that can do it all and do it all well. Like I love Eric Larson's Savage Dragon. Like that was, when Image Comics took off, that was one of the best books, and he did everything. And so yeah, I would never discount someone that can actually do it all. I'm just not one of them. And then like something you were just talking about, my podcast partner, Keith Foster, we do a podcast called Making Comics. Yeah. So if any of your guys' audience likes the way I talk and the stuff that I talk about, you can listen to Making Comics. And awesome. We release a new episode every Monday. And it's about the comics making process. So like every week we'll kind of focus on something different. We always start the episode off, number one, what we're drinking. We always have a beer. I think that's why my voice is a little hoarse. It's like when I'm talking this long, I'm used to lubricating it with delicious beers. Something he talks about is breadth. So musicians, like if you go, hey, play this, everyone's going to play it slightly different. Mm-hmm. Like same chords, but there might be a slight pause. Someone might like hold a key a little longer, just like just a little bit. And that's the breadth that makes things different, as opposed to, and he would say the same thing. He, as a musician, he knew how to play multiple instruments and he could play the chords that he was looking for. Yeah. But he would hire other people because he would want that breadth. He would want that difference in pitch, performance. Every artist is different.
Yeah. And people come at, like in collaborations, people will come at things from an angle you never thought of, which is quite often really fun if you kind of are a collaborative artist. I think that's really cool. Scott, this has been amazing. You've been a great guest, and the Slack technique is intriguing.
I'm going to implement it for my own comics. So yeah, I'll report back to you, Scott, and tell you how it's going.
Nice, man.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a follow up, and we'll have to have you back on to talk with, or you could have Scott Circland on to talk about how his experience with the Slack technique.
Of course. Yeah, if you guys want to pop on them, we're glad to have guests on.
Yeah, I've been listening to the show, so.
Yeah. Oh, right on, man. Yeah, hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, sometimes it gets a little wacky. The idea of the show when we first started, I wanted to make sure it felt casual. Like I didn't want it to always feel like school. Like I don't want this. I want it to be informative, but I don't want people to feel like they're taking classes. Yeah, I want them to feel like they're hanging out with a couple of buddies that talk about comic books and how to make them. And so that's definitely what the opening to the episodes are. Every week we talk about what we did that week productive wise, like comic book wise or creative wise. And so we'll take turns. We'll go back and forth, like what we did that week to push our books forward, and then we'll kind of have the main topic, the thing that we're talking about that week, like, pencils or inks or, collaborating, like whatever. And then we finish off with bullshit. like things that we just want to talk about, like things that we're interested in. Me and Keith were both into basketball, so basketball gets thrown around in there, and then we'll talk about all of our eBay purchase of comic books, or like Keith's into records, we'll talk about that. And,
Nice.
so you kind of get a little bit of everything. And it's just a couple of guys hanging out and talking about craft. And then, you get to learn about us as people and the things that we're into. And most of it revolves around comics. So, but some of it doesn't.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on and talking about this. I guess that we'll start wrapping because we're at like an hour and 30. So, thank you so much though. The Making Comics podcast, everybody should check out. And you guys should all check out Second Shift and at accidentalaliens.com.
Yes, that's right. And Wanders of Melisande is also there. And we have a couple of anthology series that we've done there as well. Accidental Aliens Anthology 2018 and 19. There's still physical copies of those. 2017 sold out. And Tales from the Mothership is another anthology series we have there. I have work in all of them. So if you want to pick those up and you want to check out other stories, you can go get those. And, we got t-shirts and all that other stuff. But if you hit me up at Scott Lost on Twitter and Instagram, facebook.com/Scott Lost. You can hit me up and I offer bundle packs like for all my work. If you want to pick up all the books, it's like Second Shift 1 through 12. Like you can get the first 2 trades or you can get the single issues, and it's like $45 shipped. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And then, we can do a deal like $10 more. I'll give you the 3 issues of Wanderers that are out. So, yeah. I always like to cut deals. It's like, do you want all of my work? I will give it all to you. You give me some money and I give you comic books, and that's how that works out.
That's a good method. That's actually a really good convention tip too. It's like if you do bulk deals where it's like, hey, if you get all of these, it'll be like this reduced. It's just good business.
Totally. We talk about that stuff on the podcast as well. Like, working conventions, tricks of the trade, like ways to improve your convention sales and all of that.
Cool. All right. Corey, where can everybody find your stuff now that we're wrapping?
You can find my stuff at CoreyKerr.com, and I got an email newsletter. Post it to Twitter and Instagram, and I have migrated to Mastodon. I did it before it was cool a couple months ago, but I'm starting to use it a lot more given the current state of the billionaires playground. So,
what is Mastodon?
It's an open source Twitter clone. So it's like it's like a Twitter that is in the Fediverse that isn't owned by billionaires.
Got it.
Yeah. And
interesting.
It's like all of the art of Twitter and none of the weird drama.
Oh, so it's not fun.
It depends. Yeah. If you enjoy watching the soap opera that is everybody trying to cancel everybody else, then no.
It's hilarious when you don't have to deal with it. I'm just like, these fucking idiots. It's so stupid. Just drawing.
I love it. All right. Well, Scott, oh wait, I guess you're on my channel. If you guys haven't yet, pick up my graphic novel, Jacob's Apartment, which is if you took Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind and Ghost World and put them in a blender, and you like that flavor, it's that kind of book, doomed romance book, out at bookstores everywhere. So you can ask your local library or local comic shop to carry that or pick it up. And 2 stories, my autobiographical comic about faith and mental illness. Scott, everybody's on my channel. Last time they were on Vincent Price's channel.
It's my channel. It was Vincent filling in.
True, but you got Vincent Price coming on. Sometimes you have members of KISS. Like it's hard to even know who's hosting.
Only on Halloween.
So first, how can people find your stuff, and then second, how do they keep track of this crazy channel of ours?
Yeah, so for all the videos on making comics and all that kind of stuff, and art and inspiration, all that kind of stuff, you can find on my YouTube channel. It's Circworks Art Labs on YouTube, and then on my website, it's circworks.com. You can find my comics, and you can find my digital products that'll help you create comics and all that. So check that out. And like what Josh was alluding to, this show, the Artcasters, we do this show every single week. It's a little tricky because it bounces around from channel to channel. It'll be on my channel, it'll be on Corey's channel, it'll be on Josh's channel, and we have a rotating guests as well. So to know exactly who's the guest is going to be, whose channel it's going to be on, what day it's going to be on. Sometimes I can change, although typically it's on Thursday nights. But if you want to know if you want to know all that stuff, the easiest way to do that is just join our mailing list. We don't spam you or anything. All we do is about at least 30 minutes before we go live. Typically, we will send out an email and it'll tell you who the guest is, whose channel, all that stuff, because YouTube doesn't always let you know. And in addition, it's always a good idea to subscribe to all 3 of our channels. So, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Scott. Again, that was amazing. And we will see you guys next week. Goodbye.
And thanks to the chat too.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for everyone. Thanks, everyone.